Okay, so, all right, serious. Our city was rocked a week ago. At 5:56 p.m., a young man who had been hiding in the mall food court bathroom with three wet weapons and 100 rounds of ammunition left the food court, shot five people, killed three, until a young hero stopped him. Our city was rocked. Now is a time of healing. I'm going to step back here. I'm just going to keep doing that. Now is a time of healing. Now is a time of unity. Whether you are pro-gun control or you're pro-gun freedom, drop that for right now. Because right now, we need to look at it that we are followers of Christ. And we are called to love. We are called to unify. We are called to heal. I want to challenge you with something. You've heard for the last year, Mike has said, live an unhurried life. What does that mean? It means you slow down and you have time to follow what Christ is having you do. We're called to be hope. We're called to go and make disciples. We're called to love people. We're called to invest in people. We're called to be there, to hear their hurts, to hear their angers, to share the gospel. Can you imagine what Sunday would have looked like if someone in the shooter's life would have done that? If someone would have loved him, if someone would have listened to his hurt, his anger, heard him out, prayed for him, been there for him, shared the gospel. Would it have happened? Maybe. It may not have happened. So I want to challenge you not to use this time for a political stance, not to use this time to push an agenda, not use this time to divide. We need to unify, we need to love, we need to do what we're called to do, which is be there for people, love our community. Because who knows what will happen if you do that? Who knows what won't happen if you do that? If you follow what God is calling you to do, which is going and making disciples, loving your community, loving the people around you, what could happen? So right now, I want to have a moment of silence for the victims. Victor Gomez and Pedro and Rosa Pineda. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Let's have a moment of silence. Lord, I just want to come to you. I want to lift up just your name. Thank you for who you are. Because without you, we don't have the strength to go on when we face trials in our life. And Lord, as our city is rocked, as we are healing, as we're still picking up the pieces and trying to figure out what's next, Lord, I ask that we, as followers of you, can come together and not bicker and fight, not push our own agenda, but just push you, share you, love our community, serve them. Lord, I ask that you're with the families of the people who were impacted by this awful event. Lord, not just the victims' families, but the shooter's family. Lord, they lost a family member too. And they don't have a community rallying around, supporting them. So Lord, I ask that you just give peace to everyone who's hurting right now. I ask that you bring someone up in their community to be there for them and to love them. Lord, I ask that you, if they don't know you, that this is a catalyst for them to know you. Lord, be with this time. Lord, I ask that what I'm about to say is your words. Lord, I ask that this is the first day of all of our rest of our life. That from this moment on, we see our sin differently. Lord, it's in your name. Amen. All right. I will try not to be that somber the entire time. Okay. So last week, we talked about the Sermon on the Mount and how that was a culture-changing, religious-changing sermon where you were taken from following the laws so you could be close to Christ to being close to Christ and you will in turn follow the laws. And I think it's funny, I didn't mention it last week, but if you look at the Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments came from when Moses went up on a mountain and chiseled the Ten Commandments into a stone. And now, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is giving us these new commandments, this new way to look at at our life, and he's doing it on the Sermon on the Mount. It's kind of a cool parallel. Like, I don't know, I nerded out about it when I realized that. It's just me. So anyway, we then had a flyover of the Beatitudes, and we recognize that the Beatitudes are one hunk of Scripture. You can't read them out of order. You can't go straight to like verse 6. You have to read 3, 4, and 5 before you can go into 6 because they build on each other. So what we're going to do every single week is we're going to read those as a whole, and then we're going to focus on one. But overall, last week, I kept hammering in, it is about posture, not about your own power. It is about your character, not about your conduct. And that continues on. So let's read Matthew 5, 3 through 10. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. So last week we focused on blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the spiritually needy. Blessed are those who are at the end of their rope, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. For with less of them in their heart, there's more room for God and his rule. The journey to salvation starts where you acknowledge that you're spiritually bankrupt and that you're at the end of your rope and you can't find happiness, you can't find peace without him. Like when you look to the cross, when you look to the cross and you see it and you acknowledge what Christ did, whether it's the first time you look to the cross and you see it, or you're looking at it for the 800th time 50 years into your walk with Christ, if you actually acknowledge what it is and you see what Christ did, that breaks you. It takes you to a point of despair where you realize that you need Christ. It shows you that you're a vile, sinful person. And that's a good place to be. Feeling vile. Feeling evil. That's a good place to be. Because that is the springboard to take you through the rest of the tearing down of your old self and the rebuilding through verses 6 through 10. That it's a springboard that gives you the foundation to understand what God is saying through this passage. There's a guy in the church. His name's Aaron. Good friend of mine. He's been in my small group for years. He's in my City Light community. Anyone who knows him knows that Aaron has like zero emotion. Like, he does not wear his heart on his sleeve. Like, you have no idea what he's thinking. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen those t-shirts where it's like the many moods of Dwight Schrute or the many moods of Darth Vader. And it's all the same picture, but it's like happy, sad, angry, depressed, anxious, shocked. Like, that's Aaron. That's Aaron. Like if like wearing your heart on the sleeve was a 10 to 0 scale, anyone who knows me knows I'm like a 9.85. Who said yeah? Yeah, he is. Rude. Anyway, Aaron's a 0.5. So a year ago, Aaron came to the Good Friday service, and he was faced with the cross. He saw the video of the Passion of the Christ. He heard the story, he heard the events, he heard the weight, and he was shook. He was shook. His emotions, his heart was on his sleeve. And if you know Aaron, you know that the moment I say it or Tony or Heather says, all right, love you guys, see you next week, bye, Aaron's like, peace. But this time, that wasn't the case. This time he sat in his seat. And he just sat there. And he sat there. He acknowledged what Christ did for him. And that was his first step towards receiving the gift of salvation. I'll come back to that story in a little bit. So being poor in spirit is the literal first step towards receiving the gift of salvation. But even if you are saved, even if you are a follower of Christ, you still have to pursue it every day for the rest of your life. You have to acknowledge who Christ is every day for the rest of your life. If you want to be with Jesus, if you want to become like Jesus, you want to do what Jesus did. Because you can't do that if you're not taking a step back and acknowledging what the cross is and what Jesus did for you. But wait, there's more. OxyClean. Sorry. Dad joke. I'm entitled to one dad joke per sermon. Like, I'm a dad, and half of you laugh, so I'm going to keep doing it. So if you don't want me to say dad jokes, just don't laugh, and I won't. I will. So it doesn't matter. I'm going to say dad jokes. I'm a father. So don't judge. You all do it too. Anyway, serious. So there's more. There's more to the tearing down of the old self than just acknowledging that you bring nothing to the table. There's more to it than being poor in spirit. And that takes us to the second beatitude. Blessed are those who mourn. Mourn. So last week we talked about blessed is true happiness, it's peace. The feeling of true happiness, the feeling of true peace. So is Jesus saying, happy and peaceful are those who are sad? Yep, yeah, he is. He's saying, happy are those who are sad. And I want to pause there. I don't want you to misconstrue what that is. It's not saying God will give you peace, will give you happiness when you're sad. He will. He says in Psalms 34 that he'll heal the brokenhearted. He says in 1 Thessalonians that we won't grieve the same way the people who don't have hope do. So he will be there for us. He will help us in our grief. But that's not what this passage is saying. Is it saying, what it's saying, I think, can be better understood if we look at it at a couple different translations like we did last week. So blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. That's the CSB, that's the version we usually use. The Message says, you're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one, the capital O, one, that is most dear to you. So when you feel you've lost what's most dear to you. So a knee-jerk reaction, what that sounds like is like, what do I love the most? What's most important to me? Like, God's not saying, lose your family and you'll be happy. Of course not. He's not saying lose all your stuff and you'll be happy. He's not saying that in this passage. He does say that, but not in this passage. He's saying lose yourself. Lose yourself. And not the Eminem way, not the vomit on your sweater already, mom spaghetti type of way. Sorry. Mike references lifting weights and working out. I reference music. That don't judge me. Every sermon I've had, I've talked about music. So anyway, so losing yourself. Losing your old self. Losing your old identity. Losing who you were before Christ. Losing your point of view, your perspective. Starting to see the world for how God sees the world. So, if you lose your perspective and you start seeing the world for how God sees the world, and Jesus is saying, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. He's saying, blessed are those who mourn what I mourn. Blessed are those who are saddened by what I'm sad about. Happy are those brokenhearted over what breaks my heart. What breaks God's heart? Sin. Sin breaks God's heart. So, Matthew 5:4 is saying, blessed are those who are brokenhearted over their sin and the sin of others because of what it does to Christ, for they will be comforted. You see, once we're brokenhearted for our sin and we feel the weight of our sin, and we acknowledge, we feel the contrition of our sin, we can feel the pain that Christ felt on the cross for our sin. Not the actual physical, being nailed, being whipped, all of that, but the pain, the weight that he felt. We feel that same weight. So, if we acknowledge that without Christ we're nothing, and then we feel the weight that our sin holds. Now, this is kind of a gross comparison, but track with me for a little bit. You know the feeling that you got when you were 8 and you heard your least favorite line from your parents. Can you guess what it is? I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Like right now, even hearing that, I'm not your parent. And me saying that, you're like, oh, man, sorry, mommy. Like your heart falls in your stomach. Just hearing that, because it's such a heavy thing. Like we hear it, and we hear what's being said in between those lines. Because really, what your parent's saying is, "I love you, and I will always love you." But you know better. You know that doing that would hurt me. You know that that would hurt me, but you still chose to do it. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed that you would choose to do that, even though you knew it would hurt me. That's a taste. That feeling, that when you hear that, that's a taste of what contrition is, of feeling the weight of your sin. It isn't shame. You're disappointed in yourself. You're mad at yourself. You're sad that you did this. So this week hit me hard. So I'm working from home. Anyone who knows me knows I have 3 kids. I have a beautiful 8-year-old girl and 2 twin 5-year-old boys. And they're wonderful. I love them. 1 boy, it's a lot. 2 boys, utter mayhem. And it's summer, so they don't go to school. So I work from home. And my amazing parents and my amazing in-laws watch them on Tuesday and Thursday. But Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm home. And I have to get stuff done. Like, you guys still need pastored. I still need to write sermons. I still need to update the website. So I still have tasks I still need to do. But there's utter mayhem happening at any given moment in my house. So this week, I am reading, I'm studying, I'm consuming content, educating myself to help educate you and teach you how to feel the weight of your sin. I'm educating myself on how to feel the weight of my sin. You tracking what I'm saying? I'm mentally processing. This is how I explain this to them. This is how I understand it. But I realized that for the last month or so, I'm like a rage box when I'm at home because I have stuff to do. And these little kids are always on. They always want snacks and they're always fighting. And I have stuff to do and they're messing it up. So I'm consuming content, I'm reading, I'm preparing for the sermon. I'm up in my office, and I just hear, something happened. One of the boys yells at the other one, one's crying, there's some yelling, and I snap, and I run to the stairs, and I just shout down at them. I don't know what I shout, but I get angry with my children because they are bothering me. I'm immediately slapped in the face. You're educating yourself to teach your church how to carry the weight of their sin, and you're dripping in sin. I'm getting angry at my kids for being kids because it's inconvenient. And I'm doing good stuff. They're just being annoying. Like, how self-righteous is that? That's not poor in spirit. That's not feeling the weight of my sin. So when you feel the weight of your sin, and your heart is in your stomach, and you're wrecked over it, then you can be comforted. Then God can embrace you. You can be with Jesus, and you can feel his peace, his security, his love, his comfort when you're wrecked over your sin. When you get to that place and you can recognize where your sin is, how your sin affects God, you can then take a step back and acknowledge other people's sin. You start to see other people's sin for what it is. You start to see people for who they are. You start to see, no matter what they believe or what stances they have, you start to see people as followers of Christ with blemishes, but you accept them because they're on the same path that you're on. Or you start to see people who are not followers of Christ through their blemishes and through the things that they do that wrong you or through the things that you don't agree with. You see through that and you see that they are in need of Christ. You don't look at what annoys you about them. You look at the fact that they need Christ. You hear the saying a lot, love the sinner, hate the sin. And that's absolutely true. You should separate those two because, I got angry with my kids, but that's not who I am. That's just the sin. But that saying is assuming a lot, because that saying is assuming that you are poor in spirit. It's assuming that you do understand the weight of your sin. Because if you don't, say you do love the sinner and you hate the sin. Say you do that. Great, keep it up, good job. But if you struggle separating those two, and you see the sin and the sinner as one and the same, are you poor in spirit, acknowledging that you can do nothing without Christ? Are you acknowledging that your sin breaks God's heart? Because they're the exact same. They can do nothing without Christ, and their sin breaks God's heart. You're one and the same. Do we actually do that? Are we capable? We are. When we're poor in spirit and we understand the weight of our sin. Someone asked me when I preached a month ago over loving your neighbor. How do you love your neighbor? How do you practically love your neighbor? She was like, I have someone who's really hard to love. What do I do to love my neighbor? What's a tangible thing I can do to love them? Because they keep wronging me. They keep, how do I get past it? And you don't. You don't. Christ does. There's nothing you can do to love them unless you are poor in spirit, unless you are acknowledging that you can do nothing without Christ. And then in response to that, you feel the weight of your sin. Your heart is broken for your sin. When you come face to face with the cross, you see that you can do nothing without Christ. You feel the weight of your sin. And that is where you find the peace and the comfort that you want. And that's when Christ embraces you. So earlier I was talking and explaining that Aaron's story, Aaron paused and he sat in the fact that Christ did what he did. He froze for a moment and acknowledged. But then you saw his body language change and he was uncomfortable. And that was him starting to feel the weight of his sin. He sat in this room for like an hour and a half after everyone else. Which I told you earlier, if you know him, you know he beelines out the door after. See ya. Hour and a half. He was here just wrestling with his sin. Uncomfortable, fighting it. And he fought it for like a day and a half. And you're going to have to come back next week to get the rest of the story. Sorry to Lone Ranger you, to tune in next week to see if Lone Ranger saves Tonto from the falling boulder. Sorry to do that to you, but I did. It's part of next week's Beatitude, so deal with it. So when you feel this peace, you feel this comfort that God gives you after you're poor in spirit, after you feel the weight, and he embraces you. When he embraces you, you're able to look past your own sin. You're able to see people for who they are, see their sin for what their sin is. And like I addressed earlier with the shooting, it isn't just an unhurried life. It is on a daily basis burying your face in prayer and saying, God, I know what you did for me. I know the power the cross holds. And I know I can do nothing without you. I know that every time I do this sin, every time I do this, it's like I re-crucify you. It's like I re-feel that pain that you felt. You have to pursue Christ on a daily basis. Just because salvation came from poor in spirit to mourning to next week when we talk about the humble, just because it started there doesn't mean you're still there. You have to preach the gospel to yourself every day. If you want to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what Jesus did. Close your eyes as the band comes up. Guys, I love you, and that's why this passage is so important. That's why we have to talk about it. We have to face the heaviness that without Christ, we're nothing. And that every day, when we sin, when we do what we shouldn't do, when we let God down, we need to feel that weight. And we say that because you need to recognize that every day. You need to preach the gospel to yourself every day. And we've been telling you for months, 10 minutes a day in silence to just be with Christ. Just be with Jesus. 10 minutes a day. Once you've mastered that 10 minutes a day, then you add 10 minutes of prayer. Because you don't just jump into prayer. I've been saying, you don't just jump into prayer. You have to acknowledge the weight of the cross. You have to acknowledge that you're nothing without Christ, and you have to acknowledge your sin. Guys, if you want to live an unhurried life, if you want to make an impact in this world, if you want to really love your neighbor, if you want to go and make disciples on a daily basis, you have to remind yourself that without Christ, you're nothing. Without the cross, you're nothing. Through him, peace and happiness, comfort, joy is possible. But you have to tackle the sin that you're holding on to. You have to acknowledge, you have to fight it, you have to get rid of it. You have to feel the weight that God felt as he hung on the cross. God, I love you. Thank you so much for being a merciful God, a loving God. A God of infinite chances. That even though you're not mad, you're just disappointed, you still love. Through it all, you love and you yearn for us to return to you. You yearn for us to work through our junk and return to you. Lord, I ask that you give us the strength to look through our own junk, to acknowledge that we've buried ourselves in a schedule and a calendar. We've buried ourselves in things to do. We've buried ourselves in our own sin, our own pride, our own arrogance. That we can't even see you anymore. So I ask that you give us the strength to tear down those walls, to acknowledge that we can't do it without you, to acknowledge that that wall that we built up is just our sin keeping us from you, and just bust through it, because then you will embrace us, and then we'll have comfort. I love you so much. It's in your name. Amen.